Please join us with the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call.
Note for the record that all council members are present.
Okay, then first item is the adoption of the agenda. Are there any?
Yeah, I have a, in addition, Mr. Mayor, if we can close in memory of Ted Saylor, longtime Brisbane resident. And I think Ted, not sure if he was born here or not, but I know he lived here a long time. Went all the way up to all the schools here, so. And he just recently passed away. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make his memorial on Saturday or Friday.
Okay. And I was going to ask before we do oral communications that we have a report out from the closed session, but that's when we passed the agenda. So
Yes.
Any other additions, corrections to the agenda?
Move adoption as amended.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, we have an agenda, and I'd like to ask the city attorney to report out from the closed session.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, for the benefit of the members of the public, no final action was taken, but with respect to the three items listed on the agenda, on item A, the council authorized its negotiator to open negotiations with the owner of Brisbane Acres Lot 98 for a possible purchase by the city. If an agreement is negotiated, it will come back to the council for approval and ratification at a regular open meeting. On item 2, this involves the transfer of property that's owned by the city's housing, or formerly by the redevelopment agency, was transferred to the housing and now has to be acquired by the city. Council, as a first step toward that process, authorized the city to obtain an appraisal so we can get a sense of the value of that property. And then on item 3, item C, involves a workers' comp claim. The council authorized the city's adjuster to open negotiations towards settlement of that claim, and that will come back as well to the council for final approval.
Okay, good. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is oral communications. And I have 2 slips. And the first is Sonny Hoya. Oh, sure. You're Claudia Crook?
I am.
Oh, okay, all right. So, please.
Go ahead. So Sunny and I are here tonight just to bring to the forefront the 292 Samtrans potential cutbacks to
Excuse
that.
me, if we can get your name for the record.
Oh, I think I just
Yeah.
did.
Claudia Crook,
Yeah.
Oh,
and I'm a resident here in Brisbane.
Great.
We're here to just bring it to the attention of the council again that the 292 is the main bus line from here to San Francisco. And Samtrans is proposing to reduce that schedule, if not cut it completely. There's been some adjustments in a Title VI, which is through the FTA. Sunny's going to talk to us a little bit about that. It's calling for another round of meetings to discuss the proposed changes and cutbacks. So we would like to ask for continued support from the Brisbane City Council. And thank you for the support that we have gotten. I know that a couple of members went to the board meeting, and that was very impactful. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Sunny Koya. I've spoken with you folks for last year. And I pretty much ditto what Claudia said. And take it from the top. Thank you very much. I thank each member of your city council and the staff who spent a lot of time trying to understand what was going on, and quite a few of you went over to the board meeting. I believe you were there.
I was.
Yes. And
Yeah.
Mr. Conway, you were there, and a few other people. And then in November, the day before Thanksgiving, actually that caused people at Samtrans to really pay attention to Brisbane. And that caused them to come over here to this building. It was the day before Thanksgiving, and several members of your staff were present. I was there, and the key people from Samtrans were present, and we hashed the whole thing out one more time. And Samtrans people got a very clear message that before they tamper with 292, they will have to do a feasibility study. They will have to pay attention to what people are saying, what the needs are. And I will never forget Seppi's comments. She said, when you test out the proposed route, don't forget to take with you a person, a mom who has some children, and see how she can transfer from Samtrans into a minibus at Alita. And that left them very embarrassed. So at this time, I request Brisbane to please continue to put pressure on Samtrans. They started off by saying, we are going to cut back on the services. We went over this before. First, they were going to, reduce it so that in the middle of the day, there wasn't going to be any services. It'll be in the morning, in the evening, everything. And I was the one who read between the lines because I was very familiar with what they did with 390 and 391. They converted that to ECR, and now that's going to be, there will be no 390, 391. I read between the lines right away, and I said, excuse me, that's not where he's going to stop. Once you have tested your product and you're going to cut back during the day, then you're going to say, it works. Of course, half the people will have run away by then. And let's do it for the entire day. So we'll drop you guys off at the 7-Eleven on Alita, and then you can manage on your own. Thank goodness you folks came forward, put that pressure on Samtrans, and I think it's making a big difference. And I'll tell you why I suspect this. They better not hear what I'm saying now. I'll come to this Title VI thing in a second. Title VI requires that major transportation agencies such as Samtrans, before they do a drastic change, that they go and let the people know what the changes are going to be, better than what they did in fall, so that people are not disadvantaged because they are poor, because of race, color, or any other disabilities they may have, or whatever it is. So as a result, there's nothing new coming out of these meetings. It's just that they're going to reiterate what they had previously said, but now they're going to be in compliance with Title IV. I managed to get a copy of Title IV from somebody other than at Samtrans.
Is it Title IV or Title VI?
Sorry, Title VI.
Okay.
And I will, who should I leave this copy with?
The city clerk.
There's Title VI, and there are a couple of flyers over there from Samtrans explaining about the meetings that are coming up in February. So there's going to be a few meetings only. Unfortunately, there isn't one chalked out for South San Francisco or Brisbane. We had this before. But this is where I think there may be some good message in there. Probably they don't need one over here. Probably they might not do any changes. Hopefully. So the meeting is going to be in Daly City and in Pacifica. I'm going to be on vacation in February, but Claudia has undertaken to find a way to go there if she possibly can and take some people with her so that nothing sort of slips past at this meeting, and so that something new comes out of it. And I also encourage the city council to perhaps send somebody over if possible, because there are only 2 meetings, so that we know firsthand what is going on. In a few days' time, I'll be on the other side of the world, and I will have no control over what is going on. I needed this vacation after 18 months. So to conclude, I thank all of you again for all the attention you have paid to our needs. And please continue to put pressure on Samtrans. You have already made a great impact by attending the meetings in fall of last year. If we continue to do that, they will not be able to sweep things under the carpet and do what they want to do. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think we certainly appreciate your efforts on behalf of all the people who like that bus service and rely on it.
Thank you very much. Although I'm a CAC member, which is Citizens Advisory Committee, what I say over there advises the board, but there is no conflict of interest over here. I'm not precluded from exercising my constitutional right to express myself because apart from being a CAC member, I'm also a user of SAM train services, particularly 292. If the ride is gone, why am I going to be a CAC member? That'll be moot.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sonny. Keep up the great work.
Mr.
I
Mayor?
wanted to, get some catch up from the couple of council members who've been involved in behind-the-scenes work here, and I think maybe the city manager could add to that, but you want to?
Well, I just wanted to get the latest update from the city manager on that. You know,
Okay.
of course, Cliff and I went to a meeting, and I did attend the meeting that Sonny was referring to with the Samtrans staff. But Clay, maybe you can give an update on the process.
Yeah, my understanding is that we will see a draft with the recommendations, revised recommendations, somewhere in March. And then in March and April, the board will be holding public hearings and adopting a plan presumably as early as May. One of the things that we learned when we met with them back in November was the implementation timeframe for the plan, once it's even adopted, is probably in the neighborhood of 12 to 18 months. So it could be sometime into the future before people actually see changes. I've been given, I guess, a sense that our issue has been heard. That's certainly no promise. And, we're kind of awaiting to see what comes out in the draft. But staff is following that. Staff will be attending the meetings, and we will keep you alert to, when the official recommendations come out. But again, we're told now that won't be until March.
And I did get feedback from 3 of the 4 members personally that we did have an impact on that process, so.
Yeah, I did as well. And, I think when Sonny came to the council, and today there's this meeting, and, we hope that you guys get on it. And then we got the list, I think it was from Sherry, of the board members that are on that board. And you're right, they did listen. And so when that important meeting comes up, Clay, in March or April, I think giving us that list again. I think, didn't we talk with Adrian when she came in about 292? So, she's aware of it.
Member of the Board of Supervisors.
Yes, and so, she's
She's also on the Samtrans board, but she did.
Yeah, she's on that.
That's
she's
also
that
on the
board.
Samtrans board?
Yes, no, she is on that board, and so, she has some clout, so, and Carol Matsumoto.
Yeah.
So, and at that
South
meeting.
San Francisco Council.
That's right, and Carol was very adamant about keeping 292. So she has a stake in the game, and she's on the board. So
And Jerry Deal also, who's the chair, I think. So he's a council member from Burlingame.
Okay. So we're in there. We're going to stay with it because obviously it's in our interest as well to do the best we can. Okay, thank you.
thank you, Son.
Yes, sir.
My name is Steve Rodriguez.
Come on up.
I'm not sure the protocol.
Protocol is you got to be up here if you're going to be on TV.
Oh, great. My name's Steve Rodriguez, and I'm a resident homeowner here in Brisbane. And I just wanted to mirror what Sonny said. I want to thank the council for all your work. And my wife and I both use the Samtrans bus lines, and we really rely on those. And so I really do encourage you guys to fight for keeping the schedule for us. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you,
you.
Rick.
We'll do what we can. Okay, Wayne Hendricks.
Hey, Wayne.
Good evening, everybody. Wayne Hendricks, 790 Humboldt, longtime Brisbane resident and advocate of Brisbane. All the places I travel, I advocate about Brisbane not to move here, but just to appreciate it. Obviously, the city of I want to say thank you again to the council members and all the city staff for all the work that you guys put in on our behalf. I know it's a tough one, especially this time of year with the economy and everything that's going on and the challenges with the empty seat. All these things that you guys take care of, I sincerely appreciate and always have. From the day I moved into Brisbane, somebody knocked on my door and they were having a recall thing. This rather radical guy who still lives in town was banging on my door, and he sat down for an hour and tried to convince me to sign a petition that I knew nothing about. And I said, you mean they pulled the wool over everybody? Nobody knew it at all? I said, come on. He left. So I didn't vote for that recall, and I would never do that because you guys put so much in. Whether or not I agree on one thing, that's a different issue. But the work you guys put in, I want to sincerely thank you from the bottom of my heart. You guys do something that I can't do on all our behalf. And that goes for all the city staff, too. I have the same feeling about the staff. They take the slings and arrows. It's like walking around. They might as well have shirts with targets on them. Because
Chief has a bulletproof vest.
and she sits in a corner with no door or window behind her. Anyway, I'm back because, as you mentioned before, the marina is my passion. And I was here, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago when Ted was getting ready to, he brought his report on the status of the marina, the future of the marina, and all that jazz. And I reiterated and backed him up a little bit. And then I came back again, I think the following month, and talked about, I had done a little more in-depth looking at the docks, stuff that was obvious, but then looking at them with a critical eye. And I continue to do that. You know, I'm down the boat at least once a week, checking on it if nothing else, and walking on those cracks and looking at them, and they're more and more and more and more. So I guess right now the first question I have is, I was down here 4 months ago, three or 4 months ago, 3 months ago, it's a third of a year. And I'm wondering if there's any forward progress with that thinking, budgetary, is anybody, you know, what's the plan? Was I effective, or is other things sort of overwhelming it, or all the above?
Okay, we have an answer to that, but, and I say we're moving ahead, but let's get the specifics from the city manager and the finance director. We are moving ahead.
Well, great.
But
Well, first of all, Wayne, you always have an effect. I say that in the most positive way.
I'm trying to make it positive.
And you do. We, as Wayne has indicated, we've had a meeting with the council some number of months ago, and the Harbor Master, Director of Marine Services, Ted Warburton, who is now retired, laid out a number of improvements and a kind of a schedule and a kind of an approach with regards to doing that in-house as opposed to contracting out most of that work. Subsequently, he has retired now, and I've got a new person, Randy Bro, our Public Works Director, who has got a good background in construction, and he's getting his head around the whole marina operation, who's now in charge of the marina. And he's, in our consultation, has said, you know, I'd like to take a little bit of time to really get my hands around this and to look at this and look at the cost estimates and make sure that what we bring forward to the council is really something that he can deliver. So it's in process. There's also the whole issue of how we're going to finance it, which to some extent is a rate issue, and we're looking at that. As you know, Susie Hemlin is now our acting harbor master down there, and so that's a change also. So we have had some pretty significant staffing changes, but the issue is transitioning with them, and our anticipation is that we'll be bringing this back to the council. I believe in April is the time of thing that I think we have on our the kind of working list that the mayor and I have. So in progress and moving forward.
Very well said. But in construction, usually there's a budget and a time frame and a, you know, but I understand the transitions and all that jazz. At the same time, as I said, I put a more critical eye to the docks as I walk them. And in the past, people have tried to fix them with a variety of different materials and different approaches, and some cracks are small, some are bigger, and a lot of the patches are now blowing up because the rust has to be addressed. This is somebody who's familiar with this issue has to be at least, what do you call it when you get an advisor, estimates,
Consultant.
evaluation, consultant, somebody who really can tell us if these are even fixable. Because once a rust attacks the steel and starts traveling in the concrete, I don't know how it can be stopped. I'm sure we could find Band-Aids on it, but whoever does it now shouldn't waste money or time. If we start to repair those docks, we should get somebody who knows what they're talking about specifically. Now, I know Randy is very surprised by his new responsibilities down there, and so of course trying to do an evaluation of what that is as well as his other duties are a challenge. But still, this produces a lot of money. This marina has taken care of itself forever. And things changed when the budget changed. When the budget got swept into the Park and Rec or General Fund, whichever one it is, just around the time Ted came along. From then on, the marina was done okay, and then we have a new restroom with washers and dryers. But the other side of that is the docks have continued to deteriorate, and now it just has accelerated, as I've said before. And I just can't stand to just stand by and watch this happen and not bring it up again and again, because it's important. The marina makes money. We're going to end up in a dramatic scenario where the docks will become unusable. If any one of them becomes unusable, everybody on that dock stops paying rent. It's going to have to be readdressed, providing nobody gets hurt. And there's a number of spots out there that are definitely a liability. There's no question about it. So I'm going to continue to advocate for the marina's financing. What's happening now is all the stuff that's been put off, it just continues to grow. It's deferred maintenance, as you will, but it's critical to the well-being of the docks. And it's like the Bush administration left this horrific situation of the government with the debt. And we're doing the same kind of thing for our future generations. Another 10 years and we'll have parts of the marina, a lot of the marina that won't be usable. And it's like Ted pointed out, to replace one of those floats is $500,000 each one, and there's a bunch. And that's, I don't know if that takes into account the gussets and everything else. So it's like having a little leak in your roof. It's not only inconveniences a little part of the room, but after 5 years, you're looking at something very, very serious. And it's the same deal. I would like to see the marina budget separated again from the municipal budget until it's 100% up on its feet. We've got dredging coming up. That's going to cost, I don't know what, millions. And where's that money going to come from? The next council or the next staff is going to have to address the big hole in the ground that's being left right now today. So I know it's a tough time for everybody, but as far as I'm concerned, I'd rather close that swimming pool, deck it over, and call it good until the marina's fixed and there's enough cash to support it. I don't know, that's my personal example. And I'm a swimmer. I've always been a swimmer. I get a fair amount of use out of that pool. I love it. But I'd rather see the docks taken care of, because that dock will eventually be able to pay for the pool again. But not the way we're going. So another little question I've got down the marina is that big...
Let me just say that, I think the council agrees with your concern. And we have given direction to staff to move ahead, and as soon as things come together, we're going to get at it. And it's good to remind us, for sure.
Yeah, and like I said, I was here...
We are taking your advice and others, and Ted's, of course, and realizing we got an issue to deal with, and that's a direction from the council.
Just to, if I could, not to stop you there, Wayne, but maybe from Clay, what's the time frame that Randy may have this assessment together?
Oh, we're planning on coming back in April.
April?
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's also the whole, budgetary part of this too.
Right.
And that's really going to have to be, I think we'll probably talk about that in April, because I think you need to talk about it at the same time. But you probably are going to make decisions about that in the context of the budget, because it's whatever you do affects other pieces of the
Everything
budget.
else.
Right.
No, for sure. And we do have a meeting tomorrow, Wayne, the mayor and I. We're on the budget subcommittee, and I'm sure that'll be an item that we'll be discussing. But as the mayor had said, we had already talked amongst ourselves about perhaps maybe hiring 2 new people from out of Public Works to start with the marina, and then maybe eventually become part of the workforce of the Public Works Department. And we all had a little tour from Ted in regards to the issues out at the marina. And so we've seen it firsthand. We know
Right, that was 6 months ago, right?
Yeah, now the one I had with Ted was after he retired. So I missed the one that the council members had. So I had a pretty recent tour. And there definitely are some issues. But the marina, from what Ted was pointing out to me, is still in pretty good shape. for now. But we got to get on it, or we will have issues, and we're all aware of that.
Yeah, like Clark said, I'm not Chicken Little, the sky is falling, but I can see cracks in it. And it's not falling down yet, but all it's going to take is one of those cuties in high heels to step on one of those cracks there and stumble and fall and hit her head on a cleat, and it's going to change the landscape dramatically. Or somebody who's just fishing around for an excuse to do something like that. It's going to, I don't know. I can't help it, guys. I got to come and bring it. I mean, it's been 6 months since that appraisal, and at that point, as far as I'm concerned, the clock should have started ticking by everybody about the money. Because the money is the big elephant in the room. There's no question about it. In fact, there's several of them in the room, I'm sure, that I can't even see right now. But it's a tough one. I know you guys are under the gun. Everybody in the room's under the gun. So everybody feels the pinch. I do too. My little tiny world, it's changed dramatically. I envisioned my retirement much, much different. But I'm still working. But that's the way, it's just the way the money rolls sometimes. Like I said, I would advocate getting the budget separated again, just the way it was. When Jim Skeels suggested or I don't know, Jim was instrumental, I know, at the time with bringing the marina budget into the, I guess, the Park and Rec budget. And somebody like the harbor master had to be the administrative harbor master, because just being the harbor master, other people could come to a meeting. So we had to give him an elevated position and a raise to go with it. And man, I shook my head and I stopped coming to the meetings for a long time after that one, because that just flat didn't make sense. Of course, that was at the same time staff was training people and then they go to Millbrae. So it was like damned if you do and damned if you don't. And I'm sure we're in that situation now. But I'm rooting for you guys, and I'm going to keep coming back. And if there's anything I could do as an advisory capacity at the marina, I'd be glad to help. I could maybe fish around and try to reach out in the marina industry to find somebody who knows what they're doing with those floats. That's something I could do. It's an opinion. Bill says I'm really good at giving opinions.
A copy of your notes, maybe, to Sherry to pass on to Randy.
Okay, well, let me clean them up a little and put them in English. Right between scribble and mumble right now, but I'll see what I can do. Well, thanks for your time, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the good work you all do.
Anyone else like to make an oral communication? Okay. So we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the consent calendar. And
Just like to remove item F.
any removals?
Item F.
Item F. Okay, I'd like to remove item A. Any others?
Move approval of B, C, D, and E.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. The reason that I removed item A is because there's one small little mistake on page 2. Down at the bottom, about Lassen Street. And said corrected copies that reflected that Lassen Street was located between Humboldt Road and, this is the mistake again, it should be Solano Street, not Sierra Point Road. It's a 2-block street, not just one. That's what we had to fix, remember? The city attorney will remember. Okay? All right.
Yeah, it goes through Sierra Point down to Solano.
Down to Solano. That's the walkway.
Terminates at Solano.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Okay, could I have a motion for approval of those minutes?
So
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Clark?
Yeah, item F, regards to approve the Open Space and Ecology Committee to have a public forum to have a discussion about the documentary of No Deposit, No Return, which was done in 1965, that I just really want to support that. Thanks to Michelle a number of years ago, and I think, Terry, you were there. We're at Michelle's house when we were having a discussion, and she showed me this old messed up copy of this, and we did some inquiry, staff did some inquiry on it and was able to contact found out that that was, at San Francisco State? Yeah.
The archives.
At the archives, and this was a Cron 4 news segment, and that and it was meant for public display for the future. And here we are, 40-something, almost 50 years later, and has to do with landfills. And so I think that our citizenry will be very enlightened by this video. And some of the things, that if you're able to actually slow it down and look at some of the things, you can see the landmarks of where things actually are. Because this started out with the original landfilling of what's now Sierra Point, also is in that segment, I believe, a portion of it. So it's real interesting. So I certainly support it, and also right before the meeting, Michelle brought up a tape that was done almost 20 years ago now, 1996, November of 96. And it had 3 of the original council members talking about how they acquired the Baylands. And wanted to see if we can get that to put on, coincide with it, and I think that that's a great idea.
Colin?
Are both of these going to be on the website so that we can all download them and look at them?
The no deposit, no return is already on the website.
It is on the website.
Yes.
Great.
Right. The other,
The other one we're still trying to find in our archive room.
okay. We must have it because the city paid for it.
Right. It's just a matter of, we lost our archive years and years ago, and so now it's and Fred was the last person who had the archives. So it's a matter of having somebody go dig around and find the original.
Am I not mistaken? Doesn't Michelle Salmon have a copy of that?
Right, and we talked about this at the Open Space and Ecology Subcommittee on Communications. She says that we as a city have a better version of it in our
Should have the
archives.
master.
Right, we should have the master in the archives. It's just a matter that if our archives are not
Succinct.
yes.
Yeah, I have an old VHS tape, which is already starting to degrade, even though I've only watched it twice, because it's been sitting on the shelf for, 18, 16 years. And so I'm hoping that the city has the original film and a better copy of a tape that we can at least make a DVD, and then I'd like to cut out that one segment to be able to show that one segment of the interview, because the whole interview is an hour and a half long, a fascinating piece of history that I just
So
was
this
riveting.
this is the additional footage, not just the no deposit, no return we have digitalized.
Right. This is a interview that Ray Miller did of Ernie
Moderated.
Conway, Jess Salmon, and Red Williams, or Jim Williams, in honor of the 35th anniversary of the city of Brisbane. So it's a long conversational type of interview, but there was a very enlightening segment about how we got one over on Daly City and acquired the landfill and before it was a landfill, acquired the train yard and all of the SP yards and what is now the Baylands for the city of Brisbane, for our future, which is now. And so I thought that would also be very enlightening. And one of the reasons to show a documentary on environmental issues that is, 30, 40 years old, more than almost 50 years old now, is because it is still amazingly relevant for today, of our wastefulness in our society in terms of our garbage stream and how we handle it and what we do with it. And the title of No Deposit, No Return. And that film is every bit as relevant now with our use of plastic water bottles and everything else that we're doing in our current lives. Where are we going to learn? And so I thought it was and especially with the draft EIR coming up, I thought it was the perfect way for the Open Space and Ecology Education Subcommittee to kind of kick off interest in reviewing the draft EIR and also historical context about the Baylands and how it came to be in our purview to oversee that, and also just a basic lesson in ecology and garbage stream and what we're doing. So I thought it meant all of those things, and I'm just thrilled to death that hoping the council supports this, and that the citizens come and watch this together and participate in discussion group. Dolores Gomez has agreed and invited and agreed to come and also kind of tell a few stories about Brisbane, and obviously it would be an open forum for other people to discuss things that they remember about it as well. So I'm hoping it'll be a really good community event. So thank you.
Great. Do we have a date yet?
Stuart, did we?
Now, we're debating between either trying to do it on a Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock or a Sunday at 4. There's benefits to both. If we do it Sunday at 4, we're hoping to get more of the parents and kids, which we think is very important for something like this. Because if we do it on a school night at 7, we're running into issues of having kids have to go to bed. The problem with doing it on a Sunday is a lot of people are busy on Sundays. Right. So I think the Open Space and Ecology Subcommittee is going to wrestle with the two of them. They were hoping that Dolores would make the decision for us by saying she was only available one of those 2 days. She's available both.
So if the council has an opinion, I'd be very interested to
I
find
do.
that out too. And we're hoping to have it here in the community room.
Right.
I do too.
And
I have a very strong opinion about it.
there's no football that day, Clark.
No, I know. No. What I'm saying is you should coincide it with Earth Day on around that time frame.
That would be in April.
Yeah,
That would
That's
be
when we
April?
coincide it.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, you should, I'm not saying on Earth Day, but around that time frame.
Perhaps as
Brings
a
awareness.
lead-in and put it out at the schools as a lead-in or a preparatory thing for Earth Day activities. And is there a reason we couldn't do it on a weeknight earlier?
The challenge with doing it on a weeknight earlier is just having parents come home from work. I mean, if you think a 6 o'clock time would be better, that would, I think the Open Space and Ecology Subcommittee is open to whatever the council would like. One of the issues that the Open Space and Ecology Subcommittee talked about was trying to do it towards either before or towards the beginning of the draft EIR conversation. As the draft EIR conversation is being moved further and further out, the Earth Day may be a very good idea, because what we could do is combine that with our Habitat Restoration Day and make it kind of maybe one weekend for one weekend for the other, just to make it a full bookmark, bookends.
Really educational for the
Right.
kids,
Yeah.
Right.
But we're really hoping to get the kids there, because I think that's, I remember growing up in the late 60s, early 70s, where it was just becoming to be an issue. And the issues that were talked about back in the 60s, as Michelle says, are still very relevant, but were very stark back then. Whereas with a lot of what we've done recently, we have swept some of these major issues under the carpet, because we think we're solving them. And when you look at no deposit, no return, and I did look at it on the website, so I know it works on the website. You can really see in very stark contrast the bottles falling and what's going on in the garbage dump, whereas now kids really don't get that sense. It kind of is mysterious at this point.
It's just all swept away.
It is. And I think it was back then too, but I think this documentary really brings it to the forefront. So that's why we really want to do it when the kids are available. So what we could look at is see when what the school schedules are.
Yeah, we're open to suggestions. What we're going for is maximum attendance and participation. And that is the most important thing, is that everybody gets to see it in a community setting. It's one thing to watch it yourself on the computer at home, but it's quite another to sit there with other people going, "Oh my God," it's just amazing.
Stuff we watched growing up.
Yeah.
Especially on the big screen, the trucks will look bigger.
And
it'll have more of an impact.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
We're thinking food too.
Serve refreshments.
Yes, we talked
People
about bringing
come.
food.
Yes, we're going to do that.
Of course.
Yes, so we're definitely open to suggestions on the date, and also whether it's a weeknight or, a weekend day.
No bottled water though. Just
No
let you know.
bottled water.
I was going to suggest, how about some garbage art? That would probably get the kids involved.
Yeah, that actually would, and some, different ideas on recycling and reusing would be really good, so.
Well, the school does promote that, I mean, as far as, all the way up, and you might want to check with Chad Carvey and the principal and see what, kind of working in there with them.
Yeah, what kind of synergy we could develop.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. If you have any other good ideas surrounding this or anything that,
I have one other historical suggestion.
yeah,
We were having an interesting conversation with Chris Hart, our local railroad guy. And he has all these old pictures from between, 1905 to 1920, 1930. And you recall that we always had this understanding that the first filling of what became the landfill was the San Francisco earthquake debris. Well, in all the pictures that he has, and they've been really heightened in intensity, you can really see, those pictures show that there was no filling of that area until sometime in the end of the teens. So that there really is no earthquake debris starting the landfill that actually was really started with San Francisco garbage, not earthquake debris, according to the pictures that he has.
right.
And there's some really interesting pictures from 1905, 1908, 1911, and you see all this area. And of course, in those days, it was all open water.
Right.
And so it might be some interesting additional historical pictures to add to the presentation that, you have this sense of what the history is, and then all of a sudden, somebody comes up with some evidence,
Yeah.
photographic evidence,
Yeah, I've
and
seen
maybe
some,
the history is wrong, and
Well, there actually was an area where there is debris out there, and I know that,
not according to Chris Hart's pictures, but.
yeah. Well, I mean, I go from my mother had actually gone out there. She had talked to somebody one time and did some excavating on some of it, got old bottles and things like that, collected them from there. So there was some kind of debris, and it was, allegedly from 1906 earthquake, so.
But you can see a picture from
Right.
1911, and it's all open water still.
Yeah.
it's highly possible that San Francisco moved their debris pile from the earthquake to Brisbane at some point when they were starting to make progress with construction. Who knows? But it would be very interesting, and I will contact Chris because it's very, very interesting to display those photos, maybe on easels here at the same time, so that people could get a historical context and really kind of understand more about the whole area, what we're looking at.
Now,
Instead
the
of,
part that, became the rail yard, evidently the fill for that came from the excavation of the tunnel into San Francisco and from Ice House Hill.
yes, and from my South Hill.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Tank farm,
Yeah, right.
that's
that
later.
was part of the mountain.
Anyway, they're amazing photographs, historical photographs. So
Yeah.
take the history back even further.
That would be really exciting.
It might also be something that we could involve the Friends of the Brisbane Library, along with the school, on getting the word out, or having art display or something to get interest in the variety of things.
Yeah. What is the seated capacity in this room? Do you know?
100.
It's over there in the corner, written in the corner. I can't read it from here.
Okay, I'll check it out. 242. Okay, that's our goal. We're
I
going to
think
get,
that's standing.
oh, well, standing room only is fine with me. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Carol?
Does this have to do with this?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll be brief. But I think this is very exciting, considering that if we present this right at the time that we're presenting the EIR, I think that we'll get a lot more community interest in the EIR, and I'm very excited by the idea.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, motion to approve item F, all those
I'll
additions.
second it.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, we got it.
Thanks, Michelle. Kind of funny, Daly City hated us for a long time over that. They wanted to be the second city to Bay the Breakers. We got a good relationship with them now.
Things have. Okay, so old business, we got an update on the city council vacancy.
Okay.
Okay, go for it.
As I'm sure you're all aware, there's a vacancy on the city council, and that was because of Seppi Richardson's resigning due to retirement. And she resigned on December 29th, and the council has 60 days, which turns out to be February 27th, in which to make an appointment or to call a special election. And at the last city council meeting on January 14th, this was discussed, but there was confusion over whether appointing within 60 days meant that you had to make a decision to appoint within 60 days, or whether you actually had to make the appointment. Subsequently, legal counsel determined that you do need to actually make the appointment within 60 days. And so that's why it's back on the agenda tonight, to either discuss or give direction to staff.
Okay, any further comment from the city attorney?
No, I concur with Valerie's analysis there. The question was whether you can start the process, and the answer is no. You have to complete the process, either make the election or make the appointment or call an election. The dates are determined again by the state law. You've got a certain period of time by which the election has to be called, and if you did it earlier, you could still squeeze it in on because the June 3rd, June 4th or whatever, but that would involve a cost to the city if you made the appointment, let's say, at the next council meeting. If you decide to call an election at the next council meeting, which would be after February 11th, then it would go on to the regular November ballot, and there'd be, as Sherry points out, there'd be no additional cost to the city. So I think the choices are, if you want to make an appointment, you'd have to do it by February 27th, which would be really short. If you want to call an election, it's really a simple choice. Do you want to scramble and get it done by the June ballot, or wait until the November, at a cost to the city, or wait until the November ballot at no additional cost to the city? Mm-hmm. There again, if you were going to call a special election, we couldn't wait until your next regular meeting. We almost had to do a special meeting to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, as I reported at the last meeting, the council seemed to be not in the mood for a special election in June, since of the cost and also the timing, since the term runs out in November.
Right.
And so then the question of appointment came up, and we had kind of a 2-to-2 split. Two members of the council, Clark and Cliff, believing that we should go with former council members, and two of us felt it should be an open process, Terry and myself. And so we got an impasse, and so we weren't able to go any further than that. And I don't know whether there's any further discussion to be held on that. And if we're still at the impasse, then I guess it's recommended that before the 27th, we at least make some determination about the election, rather than just letting it happen by default. Am I right about that?
Yes, we think that you should take some action before the 27th.
Okay.
I guess it comes down to the question, has anybody changed their mind?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you know, I just want to give clarification. I'm in favor of not appointing someone. I think we should just stick with the four of us. But if the council is inclined to want to have a fifth council member to serve out the rest of Seppi's term, then I would be in favor of going with someone who has already had experience, which of course would then be a former council member.
Yeah, even if we started it now, I don't think we'd be able to do it by the 27th if we open the process up to everybody because you may get 10 people, and I saw how we struggled with our appointments on Open Space and Ecology, Planning Commission, and PB&R, and we ended up expanding the circle on all of those. That was our discussion, because we had a lot of really good candidates. And as a council, we couldn't make a decision that was very succinct on those seats that were available, so we made more seats available. And I just don't see that happening if we opened it up to everybody. And, you know, for somebody to come aboard, you know, I still believe that they need to be ratified by the public to really understand what it is to get elected. And we have an open seat. We'll probably get 10 people to run for the next election in November. It happened last time. So I'm still with former council members, so it's up to Terry or Ray, if any of you have changed your position. And
I've had several members of the community approach me on the subject, and I've given them, I've talked to them about the process and what it means to me. I do think that if we were to appoint, we should have the broadest selection of candidates available to us and be able to have the best talent there is. And so I still am not comfortable limiting our selections to only include prior council members. And I think that with some hard work, that our council can be effective as a four-person council. And I don't think it's fair to a prospective council member to run in June and then run again in November. I think that would make them less effective. So if we can't agree on an appointment process using a broad scope of candidate pool, I would rather do the election in November. So my feelings haven't changed too much from our prior meeting.
Okay, mine haven't either, and I agree with Terry. Just wanted to point out that we did receive a letter from Kathy Wall, who basically makes the Terry Ray argument that, and I'm sure you saw the letter, that she argues that we'd be better off with 5 than 4, and that it should be an open process. But since we are still at an impasse, I don't guess there's much more we can do this evening.
Well, it's not
on this issue.
Yeah, there's not really much to really discuss about it, because we all have our points of what a democratic process is. And, you know, to me, having been on the council, well, now the longest, and what I've observed is council gets pounded over decisions that they're expected to make a lot of times. And for us to give somebody 20% of the power, basically, to make decisions, and the 4 of us make that decision, we're really going to get pounded. And I just don't believe that we can even get there by the 27th if we open up an interview process. I just don't see it. You know, we'd have to call out candidates, we'd have to interview people, and it's like, what are we going to find out about 15 minutes interviewing people? And I just don't see it happening. So really, it's become a moot issue, and, you know, and I do believe the 4 of us, you know, are going to be able to come to consensus on most of the subjects. You know, I thoroughly believe that. You know, it just, you know, and if it's something that we can't come consensus on and it needs to be done, we'll find a way. We'll tweak it and maneuver around till everybody gets a piece in that puzzle, and that's part of the process. And
it's called compromise, and
yeah,
it's
exactly.
and it's something that I think we're able to do.
I do too. I'm confident of that. So there's not a whole lot to be said, other than just move on now.
Okay. Unless we open it, is this?
Unless any members of the public would like to weigh in. Greg?
Yeah, no, we definitely have to have the public weigh in.
Hi, I'm Greg Anderson, 349 San Bruno Avenue. Who would have guessed that I have an opinion on this subject? I think that it's a lot of work to be on the city council. I think you guys do a great job, and I feel that the city council would be missing something if you only had 4 people. I think you'd be well served if you got a 5th person up here. I also think that the best thing would be if someone like Cy or another former council member was willing to serve. That kind of person would be the best person to appoint to that seat. But what if they aren't going to be standing forward? I think that the best thing you need to do is open up for an open process, see who steps forward, and you're on a tight time limit. You're not going to be able to decide, you're not going to be able to discuss things as much as you'd like to, but you're just going to have to make the best decision you can with the people who you have available. So that's what I would recommend. Making decisions, it's the most important thing you do on the city council, and this is one of them. Be decisive.
Okay, thank you.
Just so it's noted, we did have interest from our 2 past council members who retired recently, one the election, one on his own.
Yeah, and we've received indicators from other people who are not past council members who are interested. So we probably would have a pretty good number of candidates. Yeah. Yeah, Wayne, you had your hand up? And then Michelle.
Wayne Hendricks again. I concur with what Greg said. Obviously for the short time span you got, it makes sense to bring somebody who's got some experience. And maybe contact several council members. So maybe you can find one of those former ones that might step in for the interim, even if they didn't want to rerun. They might fill the gap, and they've stepped up and given so much of their life in the past. Maybe you could look to other members that are still former council members that are still in town and ask them or suggest that they might, I don't know, that's one idea. What about somebody who's formerly in the planning commission or former staff? At least they understand the mechanics. You wouldn't have to explain definitions like if you got somebody like me up here. You'd be bad trouble. It'd slow the whole process right down. Maybe just to consider it for the interim. That just sounds like the logical way to go to me. May not be what you want, but then, decision time. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, thanks. Michelle?
Michelle Salmon, Brisbane resident. I have every confidence that the 4 of you can carry us through November without seating a 5th person. And this is based on my having sat through numerous meetings. There is very rarely ever a time when you have a split vote. The few times that you've had a split vote, it's usually been 4-1. It's rarely been 3-2. Your disagreement on how to handle this situation is probably the only example I've ever seen where it's been an even split, even without another council member there to vote, as there would be if someone had to recuse themselves. All 4 of you were duly elected and never unelected, and I have great faith that you can carry it through until a reasonable person is elected by the public in November. And I don't say this lightly. I've really thought a lot about what you're facing. And it means that each one of you has more work to do because you have more committee work to do. But as far as making reasonable, honest, straightforward decisions for this city, I have every confidence in that. Because should you be split 2-2, it would not be a decision. So it would be basically a no. So we wouldn't enact something that didn't have consensus. And so I feel that actually the prudent thing to do is to leave the open slot to be elected by the public. And it isn't, I know what goes into an election and running for city council, even though I haven't done it personally. I've experienced it almost all of my life in one way or another. And it is burdensome and distracting from the business of the city to run 2 elections back to back, June and November. And I would not feel as confident having either a past city council member up there or someone that wasn't elected by the public. All 4 of you were. And in that, I put my trust. And that is what I think you should do. There, I'm telling you what to do as your constituent. But, and I do appreciate the work that you do and the tough decisions that you have to make, even though I don't always agree with them. So thank you very much for your service to the city of Brisbane. I know what it costs each one of you personally from having grown up in that environment. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle.
Carolyn.
I agree with Michelle. I think that the four of you will be a better representative than to bring in someone who's previously sat on the council and supposedly will be leaving in June. I think this is just a pretty cohesive group. I've watched many council meetings, and I agree that generally it would be like one person who veers off from the other four. I think that I think you four will do a good job, and we have elected you. Thanks.
Okay. So I guess we can move on.
So we can move on.
Okay, sounds good to me.
All right, new business. This looks like a finance director issue. Has to do with refunding the 2001A Brisbane Public Financing Authority bonds. Stuart.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, council members. Now that we finally have put to rest, the best we can at the moment, the dissolution of the redevelopment agency, we're hoping we can move on. At the last oversight board meeting, the oversight board approved our DDR due diligence review. We have sent that off to the state. We have not heard anything from the state, and I think they were supposed to let us know within 5 days if they had any real issues with it. So I'm hoping that we can move on as to what to do next with the redevelopment agency. So one of the big issues that the old redevelopment agency and the new successor agency faces is the 2001A bonds. I've gone through in the background the history of how we got to where we are today. So just very quickly, when we built the marina, we started this around the 1979 timeframe. We sold bonds, tax anticipation notes in 1981 for the dredging. In 1982, a leasehold mortgage revenues bonds were issued to refund the tax anticipation notes. In 1981, the bond anticipation notes were issued for the breakwater construction. And then in 1984, the RDA issued tax allocation bonds to refund everything that was outstanding. The 1984 bonds was backstopped by MetLife, which meant that if we did not have enough tax increment to make the bond payment, MetLife would step in and make the bond payment. Of course, they would charge us an interest rate for that assistance. We got to 2001, and the RDA area had enough tax increment to pay for the full cost, to pay for the marinas if we were to use the current rate of interest. We were using 1984 interest. If you remember, 1984 was a higher interest rate period than was in 2001. So we got to the point where it made sense for us to refund the bonds. In 2001, the redevelopment agency had a bond limit of $15 million. We owed in excess of $26 million at that point in time. So the way that we were able to refund the 1984 bonds to save the redevelopment agency money was to have the redevelopment agency issue $15 million worth of bonds at 12%, which is a high percent number. But what that would do would be, once the Brisbane Financing Authority purchased those bonds from the redevelopment agency, the $1.9 million payment stream that was going to be generated from the $15 million bonds at 12% would then help support a $26 million bond issue. The $26 million bond issue cut off MetLife, which was the big issue we were facing, that if we did not cut MetLife off from having their hand in our pocket at that time, we would still be paying MetLife for years to come, and we would still be running deficits in the redevelopment agency. We are no longer running deficits in the redevelopment agency. We were able to, based on this 2001 refunding, start making payments into the housing fund. So it was a very wise decision that the 2001 City Council made. We are now towards we're 10 years later. Interest rates have come down again. In fact, interest rates had come down in the 2005, 2006 timeframe, and we looked to refinance the bonds then. Unfortunately, at that time, there was some dispute over some minor issues in the way the 1984 bond issue was drafted. 84 bond issue was drafted. The elementary school district had a question, and then the community college district had a question about the way that the bond documents are drafted and if that impacted whether or not they should get additional tax increment money. The school district dropped the case. The community college district picked it up. The community college district had an attorney look at it, and the community college district's attorney said, there is no case here for me to go after. So everybody has agreed that what we were doing was correct, that we were managing the redevelopment agency correctly, that there was no additional tax increment we owed any other taxing entity. Unfortunately, the time frame for us to be able to refinance bonds passed. Nobody was willing to refinance the bond if they thought that there was a potential lawsuit against those bonds. And then we got into the period where the redevelopment agency was dissolved. So now no one knew what we could do. We have gone back and we've asked our bond counsel what the opinion is. Can we go out to the public? He says, yes, we can. Our financial advisor has approached Piper Jaffray, who issued who underwrote the 2001 bonds. They believe they could sell a refinanced bond issue at this point in time. So the method that we're thinking of doing right now on how to refinance those bonds at current interest rates would be to not refinance the underlying RDA bonds, but to instead refinance the Brisbane Financing Authority bonds. We would not extend the life of the bonds, so we would not extend the amount of time it's going to take to pay them off. So we're not going to impact any of the underlying taxing entities' ability to receive tax increment in the future. That was one of the requirements that I had talked about with our advisors. Based on the current interest rates, which are right around the 4.3% level, we could save about $185,000 a year in the refinancing of the Brisbane Financing Authority bonds. I mentioned this briefly to our oversight board representative from the community college district, knowing that the community college district was the last entity that may have had an issue with us refinancing. She at that time told me that the community college district has a thought in their mind, because Morgan Stanley approached them, to refinance all redevelopment bonds within this county in one fell swoop. If they were to do this, we would save money on issuance costs. And I wrote in the staff report that we ran the numbers. If the interest rates go from the 4.3 that we think we're going to get to 4.47, in the meantime it takes to refinance the bonds, any savings from issuance costs would be absorbed in the new interest rate. So there's a quandary for us as to whether do we try and go with everybody. And then, although I will tell you, when I talked to the community college district, I talked to Barbara Christensen about it, and she told me they have not approached anybody yet other than Morgan Stanley with this idea. They have not approached any of the other cities about this. So the process of trying to get all the cities with former redevelopment agencies together into a room where we could all make a decision to say, this is what's best for everybody, may take 6 months, a year, 2 years, I'm not sure.
It might not happen.
And it may not happen. The other challenge that will be an interesting one for how Morgan Stanley underwrites a bond is if you underwrite a redevelopment bond today, a tax increment bond, you will have no coverage by the way the state law is written. How they then break up a larger bond issue amongst all the underlying taxing entities could become a challenge. Because if you try and put all the bonds together into one pile, and then you say that that it's going to be paid for from tax increment from all the underlying taxing entity, from the underlying successor agencies, and one of the successor agencies has a decrease in their assessed value. I'm not sure if that successor agency would then be able to make their payment on their portion of the bond. And then the question is does another successor agency become responsible for somebody else's bond? So this would be one of the challenges that we would have to work through if we try to do this en masse. And that would probably take some time to even get the attorneys to agree on bond councils to agree on a decision on how that would work. So I'm not very comfortable that we're going to get through this process quickly. Interest rates I know will hold for a little bit of time. Everything I hear, I don't know how long that little bit of time is. The benefit for refinancing the Brisbane Financing Authority's bond is that we would save $185,000 from our current payments. We currently pay about $2 million a year in payments. Our 2001A produces about $1.9 million. The other $100,000 was paid for through tax increment from the RDA. This would then obviously give us coverage, very little coverage, but it would give us coverage to make the payments ourselves. So we would have a better ability to refinance our 2001A bonds by ourselves. And I think we could do if we went with a combined group. I can't tell you that for sure. So the benefit of going with the combined group is we'd save some money in issuance costs. The downside would be we may never do it and we would continue to pay extra money that we don't have to. Or if we do it, we may be in a position where we are taking on additional risk that we did not know we were going to take on when we became a successor agency. So those would be the two challenges for us. I think both challenges we could work through if that was the council's desire. I think one of the benefits of going through the BPFA is I would say the Department of Finance shouldn't be involved in it because we're not refinancing the underlying RDA bond. However, our bond counsel, from a conservative perspective, suggests that we go through the oversight board and we go through the Department of Finance just to get their okay. I would imagine if we're saving people money, that everybody would say that's fine because it gets people to where they want. It would get the underlying taxing districts just a little bit more money every year. So my recommendation is that we go forward with this process, that I would take it to the oversight board for their information at their next meeting in February, so they're aware of what we're doing. I would imagine at that time, I'm not quite sure what the community college district would say, but I will go through the same explanation that if we do it by ourselves, we know we're going to get somewhere in the 4.3 range, and if we waited, and the interest rates went up, any savings we would get from the combined issuance would disappear. So the recommendation tonight is to have this city council direct staff to go forward with the process of refinancing a bond. Obviously, when you give me direction tonight to do that, you're not approving anything. It would be the same thing anytime we refinance a bond. We would bring back all the bond documents. I would bring back you an analysis as to what we think the interest rates are going to be, and then I would bring back what the final interest rates are. So this is just the very first step of giving staff direction to begin this process of refinancing these bonds and seeing what options we have and what our ability to do that would be.
Okay, very clear, good. Questions?
I think it's prudent to move forward, to go ahead and allow staff to move forward. If anything, too, it might light a fire under the community college district to get something going with Morgan Stanley. And, you know, it's always interesting to find out how this would ferret out through the state and everything, too. So, with the potential of saving $185,000 a year, I mean, you know, we're talking, that's a position and a half out at the marina. So, I mean, that's those maintenance workers.
Right, so just to, for council's knowledge, the 185,000, the way it would come through would be the redevelopment agency would save the money in the second year, actually, not the first year, because they have to pay the BPFA in the first year and then pay less the second year. And then we would then return money back to the state. So 50% would go to the underlying taxing entities. So, and then the other 50% would go, hopefully, to repay some of the debt that the city has, well, the housing authority, the housing agency, and then the city has repaid. And out of that, so if we were able to save 185,000, and we were able to take full advantage of that 185,000, 92.5 would go to underlying taxing entities. Of that, we'd get 20%, so we'd be about 18,000, that number. And then the other 95,000, 10,000, about 10,000 would go into the housing based on AB 1484, and then the other 80,000 would go to repay the $4.1 million that the housing has loaned the housing loaned RDA. Yeah. And then just to confuse matters just a little bit more on how this 185,000 will break out. If you look at the ROPS from this time, if you notice that we did not actually we were not able to receive, the city was not able to receive its full $250,000 because the tax increment in the RDA area has decreased over time. So
the 250 is the amount allocated in the law for administrative expenses for the successor agency.
Correct. So the first call on the money, even before we give it to the underlying taxing districts, would be to make sure we got our full 250,000.
Right.
So it's a fairly long process before anybody really sees any real dollars other than us getting our full 250 as the first step in this process.
Right.
Just for full disclosure.
So this action would not just increase our general fund or our budget allowance $185,000. But it is doing, for what I can understand of the complicated financials, it's doing the right thing, and it's bringing back additional tax increment to our schools and to where the funds are supposed to be going. So.
Yeah, I mean, anytime we can save money, I think is a good thing.
Yeah, I have a question, Mr. Brown. So, Stuart, what are the issuance costs approximately you talked about? If we went this route, that you wouldn't have it if you went the Morgan Stanley route.
Well, we would still have some with Morgan Stanley because we would become a very small percentage of a much bigger bond issue.
Okay.
I think the issue, Betsy is telling me from down there, the issuance costs are about $250,000 on the bond. That would be the underwriter cost plus the bond counsel cost plus printing of the prospectus plus the financial advisor cost. If we do a bigger bond issue, the bond counsel, the financial advisor, and the printing do not go up very appreciably. The underwriting cost goes up proportionally. So what you would do is you'd be saving money from the financial advisor and money from the bond counsel. And that's probably in the $60,000 to $70,000 range, I believe. I'd have to look that up. So we would save some money there, and that's where where it would be 17 basis points would would wipe out the entire savings.
Sure, the interest rates do go up. Okay, and then you talked about the potential of increased risk. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. So if we were to go with a larger pool of debt, I am not quite sure how an underwriter would view the tax increment that was being generated. So for instance, right now, our successor agency is responsible for the debt that our RDA has issued.
All right, and the risks, we're talking about the risks to the successor agency, not to the city.
Correct.
Okay.
But the risk to the successor agency could translate to a risk to the underlying taxing districts. And let me try and explain that.
Which includes the city.
Which includes the city and includes the Brisbane Elementary School District and includes the Jefferson Union High School District. All entities that provide very direct service to our residents. So right now, our successor agency is responsible. Right now, we know we have enough revenue coming from our tax increment to make our bond payment. We also know we have a little bit extra at the moment. So we're very comfortable in making our bond payment. If we combine with a larger pool of revenue for this and say, okay, we are now going to go from owing $26 million to, I don't know how much all the RDAs have outstanding, but let us say $200 million worth of debt. And I don't know if that's true or not. Ray is telling me he thinks it's higher than that.
You're talking about the Morgan Stanley.
The Morgan Stanley deal. That's where our risk would come in. Because if we now are part of a $200 million debt, and a taxing entity within the entire area of that debt goes down, and it's a single debt issue, what they may say is that the tax increment from all those successor agencies are now responsible for that full $200 million bond payment.
Right.
So if somebody goes down in their tax increment and somebody else goes up in their tax increment, then the entity that goes up in the tax increment may cover the area that goes down in their tax increment. And if you think about our RDA 1 area, I have every faith that our tax increment over the next 5 to 10 years is going to grow. We've got a number of approved projects out there. We've got a number of ideas for other things that are going on. We had a number of our buildings get assessed down. So we know that there's some AB8 growth in our increment. So there's a number of areas where I think we're very positive. Some of the other bond areas where the tax increment is very, as they should be, very built out. Downtowns where you already have everything built. So depending on what the market is for those buildings, it could go up or down depending on the market, whereas I think we have a bigger upside. So it could ultimately happen, and I do not know this for sure, but this is where I'm saying that there is a risk that I'm unsure of, is that depending on how the bond is written, you may have to cover somebody else's debt instrument because you've got extra tax increment to cover the entire pool of debt.
Sure.
And I don't know, I couldn't tell you that that's how it would be written, but that would be if I was a bond underwriter and I was going to underwrite $200 million or $300 million worth of bonds, I would want as broad coverage of that debt as I could get. Because the state has not allowed us to do more than one-time coverage for RDA debt. And normally a bond issuer, an underwriter, would like to have somewhere between 125% to 150% coverage to make sure that if something happens to tax increment, they still have enough money to cover their bond payment. Does that?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if I'm confusing the issue more.
Well, I thought you had talked about risk if we took it on, did our own thing, and so
the risk is if we combine with others. I think if we take it on, we have enough tax increment today to cover what we're currently paying, and if we pay less, we would have an even better coverage than we have today. So I think we have less risk doing it ourselves, but we may have some issues countywide.
But I just want to clarify, but by doing it ourselves, we're not increasing any risk than what we currently have.
Correct. We are decreasing our risk because we're decreasing our payment.
Right. Yes, and I thought you had said that there was, but
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I'm glad we talked it through.
Let's say throw
It's definitely with the county. I mean, I can see
somewhere.
where the county was going to have the risk because you're dealing with other entities in a larger pool of money, and it's just like a jumbo loan.
Right.
So. But yeah, I mean, it'd be good to get the details, Stuart.
Good. Yeah, the thought that I had on the broader county-wide one, I think there are, 12 redevelopment agencies in the county?
I think there are 12 overarching, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot more areas.
A lot more areas, yeah. But cities that have redevelopment agencies, and then, of course, the county. So trying to get all those together and dealing with all the issues that you just raised about, how do you deal with different situations and handling the comprehensive risks rather than individual city, county risk. The likelihood of all that coming together is actually pretty low in my mind. And even if it does come together, it's going to take a long time. And so my inclination is to accept your recommendation and go ahead with doing the refinancing from our point of view. And it doesn't preclude, something happening in a more collective way down the road. And, if the interest rates, continue to be collapsed like they are now, which could happen again, then you're going to refinance again under different circumstances. So now that we have this opportunity with the interest rate situation, I can't see any reason why we shouldn't go ahead.
Right. And the other risk that we have out there, if we wait too long, is whether or not municipal bonds are going to be tax exempt.
Right.
To me, is a growing concern in the way our tax issues are happening at the federal level.
It was one of the things that was recommended by some people to do away with that, yes.
Correct.
It hasn't happened yet, but.
Right, but you wait
being discussed.
You wait 2 years for something to happen.
Yeah.
That may be an additional risk.
Right. So what's the pleasure of council?
Yeah, I would say move forward. Do you want it consummated by a motion?
Sure.
Okay, motion to approve the recommendation to move forward and explore.
With the refinancing?
Refinancing of the Brisbane public financing.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Very good explanation of a very complex issue.
Yeah.
That's amazing you got all those numbers in your head, Stuart.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda has to do with the 5K Zippy race. Who's going to give the staff report?
We've got much smaller numbers to deal with.
Okay.
So staff has been approached by the organizers of the 5K Zippy race, which is been run in Golden Gate Park in past years. Councilmember Lentz, I believe, has been a past participant in the race, and I believe your club actually has been the sponsoring club.
That is correct.
And they have approached us about doing the race here in Brisbane and doing it at Crocker Park. And in consultation with Councilmember Lentz, I think the thought was to also combine it with a health fair. And he's had some conversations with Tina On from the Seton Medical Foundation about doing that also. This would be on April 21st is the proposed date. The reason we're coming to you today is that we're meeting later this week with some of the event organizers to kind of work out some of the details, and we would be bringing back to you probably at the end of February a day use permit for the park as well as traffic control permit to do this. But wanted to get a sense of the council in terms of moving forward because they are wanting to market the race and put the race information on their website and start to get the word out that it would be in Brisbane on that date. I can try to answer any questions you might have. Councilmember Lentz, I'm sure, can answer questions. He's more intimately familiar with the race and its race history and some of the details along that line.
Did you want to give us more?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the Zippy race, it's a 5K race, just 3.1 miles. It's been in Golden Gate Park for, I think, the last 13, 14 years. At our last meeting, we have a meeting at the end of the year, and we talked about the Zippy race and how expensive it is to host the race in San Francisco. And so I thought, well, Clark and I in our economic development subcommittee meetings have been talking about putting on events in Brisbane to raise awareness about economic opportunities in Brisbane, and then just kind of thinking the whole thing through of perhaps raising money with one of our nonprofits. So I know the Mothers of Brisbane have been thinking about raising money for the skateboard park. And so having half of the proceeds, up to $1,000, going to the skateboard park. In thinking of where Clark and I had been talking in regards to events, the idea of taking a race and then expanding it to provide wellness opportunities for the community, and partnering with folks like Seton, maybe getting Jerry to bring some vendors for a farmer's market that Sunday morning, maybe getting together with the Lions Club to do a barbecue to also raise money for the skateboard park. So that was kind of the crux of wanting to do the race here. So then, of course, there's the logistical part of it, and I've had a couple of meetings with Randy, and the idea was to keep it contained in the industrial park. And so we've come up with a route that seems very manageable. As Clay had mentioned, we will have a meeting Wednesday at 5 o'clock to go over some of the logistical parts of the race. Typically, when you give money to a volunteer group or to a nonprofit, they volunteer. So they would be part of the traffic control. But also our club members would be part of that traffic control. In past races, we've gotten 400 to 450 runners. Whether or not we get the full 400 for Brisbane, it's hard to say, because a lot of people like to go to San Francisco. They're used to the race being at this place, so now we have a new location. It might be difficult to get the word out, but the race is part of the Pacific Association of USA Track and Field, and so you're guaranteed getting these very fast runners to participate in this race. So at least 200 to 250 guaranteed runners. What's nice about having this race in Brisbane is that we have an already established race, and this could then eventually branch out to other races that we might have. Mountain Watch has come to me and said, hey, we want to do a race, a trail race on the mountain. A member of the mob has said, hey, I like doing triathlons, and I already have this triathlon course already set up, and I'd like to do a triathlon in Brisbane. And so now we've already done some races in Brisbane, but they've been on the fringe of town. Out at the marina, we have that San Bruno Mountain climb bicycle race, but it's up on North Hill. So and that's a pretty cool race, but we haven't really tapped into getting those people who come to Brisbane and participate in these events to then go to our shops, go to our restaurants, spend some money in town. And so by having this race here in the core of our community, we could perhaps get some of that money to our local merchants. And then by having a wellness expo, now we're providing, I think, a community benefit that that the community would like, to emphasize being healthy and exercising. So yeah, that's pretty much where it is.
Okay. And Cliff, the path of it, what's the proposed path? What do you think?
Yeah, so trying to make sure that there isn't any disruption, or major disruption, or closure, I should say, into central Brisbane. That stays open. So the race would start just past just past the T-junction here, or Park. Is Park Lane and Park Lane? Park Lane and Park Place. So so if you made a right here, and then you make another right. So just maybe at the entrance of Arthur Court's building. So this intersection, this T-junction would stay open. So it would start there, up Park Lane, make a right on Park Place, then a left on Valley to South Hill, a left on South Hill, up to West Hill Place, the cul-de-sac. Run up the cul-de-sac, come down the cul-de-sac, cross over South Hill, and then you'd be on the right side of West Hill. And then West Hill eventually connects with Valley. You would connect, you'd make that right turn back onto Park Place, and then a left on Park Lane and finish where you start. Then once people finish there, then they would walk over to the park and enjoy the festivities of the expo.
I was just curious, you know, the pathway, is that too narrow for folks? The walking path? Is that?
That's pretty chunky gravel for that.
Yeah,
it's not a.
It's not, it wouldn't be considered a road race.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a road race has got to be on street, it's got to be on asphalt. Some of the runners already, you know, kind of have chimed in a negative way about the course because there's a little bit of elevation. And not that you would think that there's that much, but there's, when they do the GPS, it shows up at about 200 feet of elevation going up South Hill. Right. And you have a very fast return.
Right.
So, but looking at some of the other races in the circuit, there's one in Portola Valley, there was one down at the Big Sur course, and the elevation is the same, if not greater, on some of these courses. So, but it's part of the, if it's, you know, if we approve this thing as part of the PA circuit, they're going to show up no matter what. In recreational runners, they're not going to care.
Yeah.
I personally think that if the logistics with the police department and the facilities needed for it can be worked out, I think it's a great idea. I think it's good to showcase what we have, you know, even if they're running by it however many miles per hour that they're going by, they'll see our town and our area, and, you know, it would be a good showcase for what Brisbane can do, so.
Thanks.
I guess I'd like to ask for staff assurance that this is something we can, I'm thinking first of all about the race and the parking that which mentioned in here and all the street closures, particularly the whole area around the community park and Old County Road. And I guess probably the appropriate person to direct this to is the police chief. Unless you want to weigh in on that, because I'm just concerned about all of the logistics we're talking about here and the staff requirements, the police requirements, parking requirements. Are we really able to handle all this? I mean, it sounds like a wonderful idea, but we're talking about taking on quite a logistical problem, it seems to me.
Right. The main focus of staff effort really is probably going to be in the Public Works Department, and that's why I didn't want to shift it to the Police Department. So that is really the focus of our meeting Wednesday night, to work out all of those details and to, I think, as Cliff has indicated, the event organizers have a number of volunteers. So it's really going to be incumbent upon the race organizers to be able to do a lot of this themselves with minimal sort of city staff work. And as you well know, the city doesn't really have any parking for this. So it's going to be incumbent upon the race organizers to make contact and get the agreements and work out whatever that agreement might be in the private lots to make sure that we have that taken care of, and then the volunteers to direct people to the right spots and things of that nature. So there's a lot of details, and the devil definitely is in the detail in this. And I think in the conversations that Cliff and I have had and with Randy, you know, making sure that we have good, safe public access for particularly the fire department, emergency, medical, and fire, as well as for the police department. and having a minimal use of city staff in the event itself is really kind of critical. And whatever city staff work we identify, we will bring that back to you in terms of the permit so that you can
But it
see
does
what
seem
is.
to me that, we're not going to be able to manage this with the number of officers we have normally on duty. I mean, and we can't just rely on volunteers, even though they might be very willing and dedicated, because it takes a little expertise, and if something happens, and you really need professional people around. So don't you think one of the things that's going to be required is they're paying for additional professional police?
Possibly. I mean, one of the things we will do is we will route this through both the police department and the fire department, get their comments, see if they feel that they have any need for additional resources for that day. And if they do, then that's something that we have to talk about in terms of the event, taking those expenses on. Yeah, I will say one thing about the event itself. The race is I believe, an hour, if that.
Yeah,
Fairly short period of time.
It is, and Ray, I hear your concerns, and I'm very sensitive to that, and I want to make sure that the race at this event goes on without any mishap, and crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's, and you addressed parking, and I'm a pretty avid runner. I've done it just easily 100 races, and 95% of the races they don't offer parking. You just show up and you find a place to park. Now, granted, we have a smaller town. And, but a town like Mill Valley will have the Dipsy race, and there's easily a couple thousand runners, and there's no parking allocated for that race. You just find a place to park. This is something that Clay has brought up, Randy has brought it up, and it's like, I want to make sure that, we do our due diligence to see if we can assign parking. Not just here in our parking lot, but with some of the private properties, and offer them sponsorship opportunities by allowing us to park in their lot for, which would probably be, I'm gonna put it as a 3-hour window, because I want the person to show up and do the race, and then I want them to go to the expo. And I want them to buy a barbecue from the Lions Club. I want them to, get a massage by, maybe, our chiropractor in town. His outfit, or something that we've partnered with through the county. And so, but and if we can do that, then it just makes the race better, in my opinion. Whereas a lot of these races, you have to, sometimes it is hard to find parking. You have to you run a half a mile to get to the start. But then again, these are runners, and that's part of what they do. I mean, you got to warm up. And so running a half a mile is nothing, but it's different than, say, if you're going to the movies and you have to walk a half a mile. Then that's an inconvenience. And so, and then, the thing with the police, the runners are good folks, and it isn't the beta breakers, but we want to make sure, though, that people are safe, and that's why we changed the course. We originally were going to have it closer to the park, but wanting to keep Old County open, wanting to keep Park Lane open, so the fire department can just make that quick shot across Bayshore onto Valley and do what they need to do if something like that happened, if a runner went down. So, but that's what you do when you're organizing a race. You have your race organizers, and you work with the city to deal with any issues that might come up. So, but I'm glad that Terry said, hey, I support it, but as long as you work out those details, and I hope that the other council members, going to do the same.
Yeah, I think we're all sort of in the same boat. I mean, it sounds like a wonderful idea, but it also sounds like a lot of logistical matters that have to be handled properly, and that means, staff time and some expense, and we have to make sure the expenses are covered, and, I mean, something has to be planned well. And the other part of it is, it does sound as if, the run itself, you've got a regular organization that's been doing this for years, and so you really are together. But the health fair is something that, I guess, that would require somebody putting all that together, and I don't know who's going to do all that and how that's going to work.
Yeah, I kind of look at this as a two-event thing. The race part, there is a ton of folks who will be a part of this that have just years and years of experience. So as far as handling that part, that'll be fine. Right. The expo part, I mean, that is something that I had thought up and felt, if we could make it a bigger event, because a lot of races, you show up, you race, and you leave. Now, the better races, they do have those expos, and it becomes a really cool event. So I would not put any extra effort onto our city staff. I mean, they're already stretched pretty thin. To do this expo, it would have to be a partnership with, say, the county health department, and they would have to be willing to put this on. And if they weren't willing to put it on, then we don't have an expo. Only if we can do this so that it minimizes the amount of effort that it for our city staff and employees.
I know that in the past there's been the road race event or a couple different events that have been in town. And normally by the time I get up on a Saturday and get out, the event's done, gone, there's no sign of them, and it didn't inconvenience me, at least. And it hasn't had an impact that I've seen. I've seen the closure notice that they've issued a permit that they're closing Valley Drive or, some section of the roadway for, 2-hour period or 4-hour period or no parking. But I've never really seen any major impact for any of the events that I've seen happen here. So that doesn't worry me as much, for inconveniencing people in Brisbane as the logistics of getting it organized. And I've done some events for bicycle racing and things that they know their stuff, and they are so well organized that, and having someone as point person, as a council member, I think that you're going to be very aware
for sure.
of what those implications and the logistics are going to mean on it. So I would have a good feeling about that. I think organizing the health fair, getting Seton or a big organization like that on board this quickly might be very difficult. And it could be that instead of targeting it as a health fair, it could be Brisbane organizations doing the food and the, just having some support services that volunteer groups do who could mobilize in a month or two. And it might make it a bit more doable than getting a well-organized health fair. Yes. Even though you're going to have those healthy people that are there for the runners as your predominant, but hopefully there are also people who are going to carb up afterwards. So that might be an easier solution, but
you're right. We're going into uncharted waters, and I have not approached the health department because I'm waiting to see what kind of reaction I get from you guys. Though we did have a meeting with Adrienne Tissier, and she was more excited about the race than all the other things we talked about. Seriously, she was. You know, and I think we had this meeting about 3 weeks ago. She says, I'll be back in 2 weeks to help you with this. So, you know, but you're right. I mean, you know, April 21st is right around the corner. It would be pretty tough to put something together, but you could see the Lions Club saying, yeah, okay, let's do something. And, you know, maybe, you know, Jerry pulling a couple of vendors to sell some produce on Sunday morning. So we'll see, you know, but again, it's trying to do this race and have our city employees do the minimal amount possible.
Well, being a runner myself.
Okay.
So funny.
Let's go for it.
Okay, I am kidding. No, I you know, support the idea. Of course, you know, Cliff and I bat things around, you know, and, you know, we're working on our economic development plan, which should be coming to the council probably in the April, May timeframe. And, but this will be passed by that time. And I think it's worth trying to see how it works out, see how the logistics work out with parking. And I think Sunday's a good time. The only concern would be is, I think from a business perspective, that gets somewhat of some traffic here is Pitco up here on, I think it's North Hill. It crosses Valley.
On a Sunday?
On a Sunday, but I think that they open at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. or something like that. And, you know, that's one of the businesses that we're probably really going to have to work with.
Yes.
You know, so I mean, from a logistics standpoint.
Yeah. You know, I mean, luckily the race is only a 5K, so I mean, there will be some runners that will finish probably under 15 minutes. And then there'll be, yes. And then, you know, then there'll be other runners that will come in, you know, 20 minutes, 25, 30 minutes.
And what time do these usually start?
We're going to start at 8:30. That's the time that we're thinking. You know, not too early where, you know, a lot of folks after partying on Saturday night decide, I don't want to show up. You know, because you're trying to find that sweet spot. But of course, it can't be too late because you don't want to disrupt, you know, the regular flow of things that are happening in Brisbane. So 8:30.
And this is on a Sunday?
This will be Sunday morning. So the race will start at 8:30. Most runners will finish by 8:30. But we're giving an hour just for folks that might want to walk. And
most runners will finish by when?
I would say by 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock, 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That's, yeah. Especially if they're top grade runners, 5-minute miles, man, take off, that's 15 minutes.
Oh yeah, no, they'll be under 5-minute miles.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite a few of them, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then, you know, just regular runners, I mean, they should be, you know, doing that 10-minute mile. And so there's a half an hour. So, and by that time, they're pretty close to the finish. So someone like Pitco, you know, there wouldn't be any runners probably after 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But, you know, the plan is to notify all of the properties that reside in the industrial park and let them know about the race.
That there's going to be a blur of people running by for 15 minutes and then it'll be over.
And then there's blur coming back, but it's going to be a faster blur because it's coming back.
Yeah. Did we address your questions, Carolyn? Okay, great. Okay, all right. Come on.
But it's going to be hard to sell them hamburger at.
This actually sounds like it should be a pancake breakfast event rather than. But you did answer my question.
Mountain Watch willing to do that? Man, they make the greatest pancakes.
Really? That's what I was thinking.
I didn't think about that.
Actually, that's what I was thinking too. The wheels were turning and I was thinking, I wish it wasn't quite so early in the morning, but it might be a good opportunity to have a pancake breakfast and maybe more of an Earth Day festival, since April 21st is Earth Day. And not just limited to health, but limited to kind of, and not limited at all, limited to a variety of different things. And maybe actually, do they have to start at 8:30?
I think it's better to start earlier.
Uh-huh. As I was thinking, maybe it was more a community involvement thing as well, with a kind of almost like a little mini Earth Day festival.
A fresh air festival.
Yeah. Fresh Air Brisbane Festival.
Yeah.
I know that if you decided to go ahead with it, that Mountain Watch would participate. I can guarantee that.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, I think there's opportunities for a lot of
Yeah.
organizations to be a part of it.
I don't know that we'd do a pancake breakfast that morning. I would have to get consensus, but we would definitely have a booth and a presence and participate. If it was even if it was a health fair, we could participate with. We offer hikes and everything like that. So
Yes. No, I think that would
Yeah.
be excellent.
I think it would really be fun. I think we should try it. It would be great.
Yes, and and now that we have our new playground, I really want to have runners bring their families. So
Yeah.
maybe the dad runs or the mom runs, and the kids can play at the playground and have a picnic, and maybe they go on a hike. Maybe that's something that you guys lead.
Well, the month of April, we're leading a hike every weekend day for the month of April, just like we did last year. And we
But not till 10, so they could run and then hike.
They could
Yeah.
run.
and hike. If
and
they're
go
doing
hike.
5 miles, I'm sure they'll have extra juice to hike.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great idea to give it a try, even maybe with some minor expense to the city as an investment in developing something for the future.
Okay.
Thank you, Michelle.
So I think we probably need at least some kind of a motion to give direction to staff. Who would like to?
Motion to work out the details on the race.
I'll second their motion to work out the details.
Thank you.
Is that enough? You're okay with that?
Yeah, actually, the purpose of tonight was more for the event organizers to feel comfortable to have.
Right, well, that's why I thought it'd be good to have a motion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's more for their benefit.
right?
Yep.
Yeah,
It's all on you.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, so all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Okay.
Okay.
So what's the pleasure of the council? You want to keep rolling along, or you want to take a little break, or what's your,
No, let's finish out.
want to keep going?
Yeah, I mean, we got, staff reports and mayor council matters and,
Then we have the successor agency too.
right.
Well, we could take a break before that.
Yeah.
You want to do that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so let's finish the regular council meeting and then take a break before the successor agency? Okay. So, we move on to the staff reports, and the first is the city manager's report.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, before we get into the items that are listed here, we have had discussion on several occasions about garbage and debris on Tunnel Avenue, and we had a enforcement success this weekend, and I'd like to have Chief Macias just kind of walk you
awesome.
through that.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Yes, I'm happy to share with you a success story on the capture of a suspect that was caught dumping on Tunnel Avenue by one of our residents. Yes. Yesterday, Super Bowl Sunday, at about 2:15 in the afternoon, a resident was passing on Tunnel, and he saw a van, a dark-colored vehicle, a van parked on the side on Tunnel Road, and he was dumping. So the resident called the police department. By the time the officer arrived to the scene, the van had already dumped and had already fled the scene. The officer swifted through the debris and found a name of a business, of a restaurant, and the debris that he located was indicative of a restaurant being cleaned, and it was on Fillmore Street in San Francisco. So the officer responded down to Fillmore Street, saw the van in question there at the business, and contacted the responsible party and got him to admit that he had dumped in Brisbane. So he had the gentleman follow him back to Brisbane, clean up all the dump, and also he arrested him and cited him out on the Penal Code section for illegal dumping. And that's currently being forwarded to the district attorney for prosecution.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'd like to just take a moment to thank that resident who did contact the police department immediately upon seeing the dumping, and encourage our residents in Brisbane to continue to be our eyes and ears and continue to call us so that we can continue to capture these individuals and hold them accountable for their actions.
Definitely.
So did he
Great
call the
work.
467-1212 number?
Yes, the non-emergency 415-467-1212.
So 2:14 in the afternoon. I mean, I know.
Well, it wasn't a brain surgeon.
Definitely not.
And he was asked why he was dumping, and he said he had no other place to dump.
Oh, boy.
That's a response he gave to the officer.
Free
so,
one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, when you say a restaurant being cleaned out, you mean a normal cleaning out or someone like stripping out a restaurant?
It was stripping out a restaurant. Yes.
Yeah.
Construction, huh?
Yeah. Wow.
Good work. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
we're pleased
Sounds
we
like
finally
a-
caught somebody.
It sounds like the Alice's Restaurant song where they took him back to the scene of the crime and made him pick up all the garbage.
That's correct, yes.
That was good.
No deposit, no return.
All right. Good.
Okay, so for the sake of time, maybe we can combine these items. The mayor and I did have an opportunity to go to the new mayors and council members conference up in Sacramento about a week and a half ago. And as part of that conference, we have the various policy committees of the League of Cities also meet on during that week. And we are fortunate right now to have actually membership on 3 of the 4 policy committees for the League of California Cities. Councilmember Lentz and Stewart are on one, and that's the Housing and Economic Development. I serve on the Environmental Quality, and Randy serves on one that deals with Public Works and Public Infrastructure. And I'm not quite sure what the name of it is, but so we just thought we'd take maybe a moment to kind of report back on those meetings. In terms of the new mayors and council members, I think most of you, if not all of you, have attended that over the years. And it is, as advertised, for people who are coming in as mayor for the first time, or coming in as mayor for perhaps not the first time, but new and haven't been doing it for a while, and for council members who are new, and to get kind of introduced to the various issues that you face as council members, and some of the kind of the common themes and issues throughout the state of California. So there was various discussions about land use and land use authority, about advocacy on key city issues, working with city staff, and then we did have a legislative or a session that we were able to supposedly attend with legislators, but I don't think we actually ended up seeing anybody that we knew, or at least anybody from our part of the state at that particular event. Councilmember Miller may want to add more to that. I know you were taking copious notes during those sessions, so maybe if you want to do that, and then I can get back to the.
You want me to do that now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I will not go through all my copious notes. We'd be here for a long time. But I'd like to highlight some things that I picked up that I found were kind of interesting, and I'd like to share them with my colleagues and whoever is interested. The first thing I'd like to talk about, and as I go through this, I'm glad that the police chief is here. You'll see why. There was a session on ethics. You know, I don't know whether the public knows, but the legislature has passed a bill that says that every council member has to pass or participate in and pass the experience of hearing about all the ethical requirements of serving on a public city council. And you have to get that certificate. And so a part of this program was attending an all-morning session on ethics, and then I got certified. I don't know whether that makes me more ethical or not, but nevertheless, I got certified. But what was interesting was that they went through the case of Bell, California.
Now, you may remember that was kind of a rogue, obviously corrupt city, in which the city manager was paying himself, with thanks to the council, something like $850,000 a year. His administrative assistant was making $365,000 a year. The police chief was making $500,000 a year. The council members were making $100,000 a year. I mean, clearly it was a city out of control. And
money to do it.
And nobody was paying money. And it's a relatively poor place. I mean, they had to even get special additional taxes. But obviously, everybody was being paid off to keep quiet, and there was no newspaper, and so it wasn't being reported. But what I really wanted to point out is there was a whistleblower who brought in the Los Angeles Times, and they're the ones that blew the lid. And the whistleblower was a sergeant in the police department who was so upset by what was going on, and he couldn't get anywhere through official channels. He complained, and guess what? He was fired. And then he went to the Los Angeles Times. And they discovered all this, and they blew it sky high, and everybody in the state knows about it now. But what's interesting was that then he went back and sued for his job back, and they offered him all sorts of punitive damages. And he said, no, all I want is back pay and my job. As a police sergeant. So we might not have even known about the Bell situation if it weren't for that person. So I'm glad you're here to hear really ethical conduct on the part of a police sergeant. But to be sad about all the other members of the council and the people who are all bought and taking advantage of the community. Now, of course, the people are all riled up, and now they're behaving like Brisbaneites. And they're really all there at the council meeting, and they're electing people, they're paying attention and so forth. But to that point, they weren't paying attention, obviously. Anyway, that was quite an interesting story. The conversation that was the most prevalent at the conference was about the Brown Act. And what's interesting is that the new people on the council, they cannot believe the Brown Act is the law. I mean, they just can't get it, because there's a lot of things that are pretty scary about it for people who are new to city council. Now, the first thing you need to know is that the Brown Act is not named after either Pat or Jerry Brown.
Ralph.
It's Ralph Brown, yeah, right. And of course, the main idea of the Brown Act is that the majority of the council in no way possible is supposed to be able to discuss a decision-making process, decision on any item before the council, either by getting together outside of the public meeting, by having email exchanges, by everybody talking to the city manager. I mean, no matter any kind of way you can think of it, if a majority of the council does this in some kind of outside of the public meeting arena, they've broken the law. And of course, the first thing that happens if somebody is discovered doing this and they're accused of it, it's vindicated, yet the action itself is rescinded. But it's also a misdemeanor, and you could get 6 months in jail and fined and so forth. So it's pretty serious. Now, there were a couple of things that were interesting that people were saying, what? You can't be serious about that. It turns out that any kind, and I'm sure the city attorney knows all this, but any kind of messaging that you're engaged in is open to public disclosure. That means if you have a private email account and you're engaging in non-Brown Act activities and somebody files a lawsuit, that is open to disclosure. There's nothing that you can do that's in writing that's private. So all these people, what do you mean, my Facebook account? Oh yeah, anything is open to disclosure, and a lot of people were really amazed by that. Another thing that was kind of interesting is that you can't say before a decision is made, I'm going to vote on it this way whether you like it or not. If you make that kind of statement, you are basically interfering with the public process, because you're not supposed to announce how you feel about anything
until you've heard the evidence and the public testimony. And there have been a number of lawsuits, evidently, in which this happened. You know, I mean, there was a famous one about a strip club, I guess. And the guy said, I never go for a strip club under any circumstances. And the strip club owner filed a lawsuit, and well, his vote was discounted because you can't do that. You have to really wait until you hear the public. Right, Mr. Attorney? That's what we were told. Yeah. Another thing that was interesting, and this comes back to even earlier this evening, Clark, you cannot really ask for a person to give their name and address. If somebody got up here and said, I'm Mickey Mouse, you have to accept that. You know, it used to be you had to get their name and address, and then it was down to, okay, get their name. And now it's, you know, you give your name even voluntarily, which is also covered by the open public meeting. And this is now part of the Constitution, by the way, which I didn't realize. It's not just legislation that people voted in the Constitution.
State.
Beg your pardon?
Constitution of the state?
Yes, Constitution of the State of California. So it's a constitutional matter. It's not just a law, according to information that I received.
You could ask if they're willing to.
Oh, yeah, you can ask them voluntarily, and when people fill out the, you know, the little slip that you fill out, that's a voluntary thing to do. And most people don't mind, you know, but there is this prohibition on forcing people to do that.
But you might not be able to get into the room to attend the meeting without giving your name and address.
There were a couple other interesting things, and then I'll quit on this, but it was quite fascinating. City attorney, this was interesting to me. It turns out that city attorneys have no whistleblower protection. So if a city attorney blows the whistle, they have no protection. You know, that they can be in trouble by the person that the whistle was blown on. And it's also another interesting thing. If you think you have a conflict of interest and you ask the city attorney, and city attorney says, no, you don't have a conflict, so you can go ahead and vote. And you go ahead and vote, and then somebody files a lawsuit. Is that city attorney's opinion going to help you any? No. You know. So, I mean, that was very interesting to me. I didn't realize that.
You told me to.
Yeah, right, yeah. The other thing was kind of interesting. Cliffy did the right thing. Remember when you wanted to recuse yourself from that zoning amendment change, and you left the room? That actually is required. That was news to me. I mean, I know people have done that, but you actually do have to leave the room. So you did the right thing.
Yeah, you know, being on the planning commission,
so you know that
you have more opportunities to leave the room.
Yeah, they're not being scolded. It's just that's the law. Yeah.
In Brisbane, everything's within 300 feet almost. Central Park.
The only other thing I wanted to point out, and I'll finish with this, is there were a lot of discussion about CEQA too. And of course, as you know, there's some move to revise CEQA. That's the California Environmental Quality Act that produces the requirement for environmental impact reports. And there's a real move, particularly on the part of the business community, to change the environmental impact laws. You know, to make them less regulatory and less interfering. And of course, environmental groups are really afraid that they're going to try to gut the thing. And so that's all before the legislature now. And I'm sure that the policy committee, that you have some information on that. But it was interesting that we were given this information that mitigation measures for environmental impacts, they must be, quote, feasible, unquote. And of course, that's always a trick, is to figure out, so what the heck is feasible? And feasibility is technical, legal, economic, and social. And that gets very tricky. And one of the things they said was that for thresholds of significance, the criteria in the general plan become very important. So it was one of the things I was going to ask the staff to sort of look into. So where are we at in terms of, you know, criteria for thresholds of significance so far as that general plan is concerned? You know, are we in good enough shape or not? I don't know. And then it was finally said that under California law, development is a privilege, not a right. That's the law.
It's like driving. It's a privilege.
Yeah, right, yeah. Anyway, that's little tidbits from my time in Sacramento, which I think was well worth it, and I got lots of other stuff. Oh, I wanted to show you. This is a book they gave us. A lot of stuff.
Turn it around.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
For the cameras.
Yeah. So it's a lot of homework and a lot of material, but very, very useful. End of report. Clay.
So I'll just piggyback on that. In addition to the league meeting, the city manager's department of the league met last week, and that was actually a sold-out crowd of city managers throughout the state of California. It was in San Francisco, which is always a good draw, but we haven't been having sellouts in the last several years, so this was the first time in quite some time that had happened. It was overall a pretty good conference, and we were able to bring a couple other staff members because we were so close and we didn't have travel or hotel expenses for the event. A couple of the themes that came out of that were just kind of the overall nature of the legislature this time around. There are 39 freshman legislators in 2013. There is, of course, a change because of the voters that enacted the new term limit law, so now that they can serve for 12 years in each chamber. So that there is a sense that that will kind of settle the legislature down a little bit in terms of being able to have a little more institutional knowledge as time goes on, and also kind of get away from this phenomenon of getting elected and then kind of almost immediately looking for your next political opportunity. So there's hope. There's a sense of hope there. The CEQA issue did come up, and it was kind of interesting. A lot of the input that kind of anecdotal input that we were receiving is that there's a sense that likely in the end there probably wouldn't be much done, but there is certainly going to be a lot of talk this session about the CEQA. There'll be bills. There'll be a lot of deliberations. But the sense was that there probably would not be any real substantive action. The other issue is our old friend Prop 13. There is, as you know, in this legislative session, there is what they call a supermajority, which is the Democrats have veto power over the any legislation and ability to move legislation through the legislature. So a couple of the things that are being looked at are lowering the threshold from 2/3 vote to a 55% vote. Of course, this would have to go before the voters of the state of California. So anything dealing with Prop 13, the legislature's role is simply to draft a proposition that would then go to the voters for approval. But one of the things they're looking at is reducing that threshold. And that would be for public safety, transportation, libraries, potentially economic development, education, things of that nature. Took a lot of notes, almost as many notes as the mayor has, paying attention when we were in Sacramento. I think one of the issues that the legislature is still trying to work its way through is Prop 26 that was passed a couple of years ago, which created some new issues with fees and how those are looked at, and its potential that they are going to seek legislation to address that, or not legislation, but seek going back to the voters with regards to that. Pension reform, again, the kind of the scuttlebutt was that it's unlikely that anything significant will happen with regards to further pension reform. As you know, they passed a fairly significant law at the end of last session, so it seems unlikely that there's going to be too much done in that area. Then in terms of the policy committees, and again, Cliff and Stuart may want to talk about their policy committee. The way the policies committees work, just for the audience knowledge, is that there is a kind of a core of information that is shared with each policy committee that's common to all of us. So the first thing you do is you go there and you spend the first hour being briefed by the league director and some of the league people on things that are happening statewide and have an impact on the league. And then you break into your policy committees after that, and you spend the next couple hours going through specific legislation or specific legislative efforts that might be coming through your committee. But you're also, in those meetings, being given kind of a general briefing on a number of things. So there's some things that we heard in each of the policy committees. Again, in the Environmental Quality Committee, we did spend quite a bit of time talking about CEQA. And so there will be a number of bills that the Environmental Quality Committee will be evaluating. As you know, we have a cap and trade system in place now in California. And so there's a question, there are a lot of questions on how that money is going to be spent. And so that's going to be something that will come through the Environmental Committee. And then there's a thing that I believe was also shared with some of the other policy committees, and that had to do with an environmental screening tool that the Cal EPA has now put together. This is an effort to try to direct funding for environmental justice issues, and they're trying to put together kind of a screening mechanism to be able to judge different areas of the state in terms of various kind of environmental issues, soils issues, air quality issues, water quality issues, things of that nature. There's a lot of concern on the league's part that this could get misused. What was kind of interesting to me is that while it sounded from a state level kind of like a rational policy tool to use, they also kind of acknowledged at the same time that they really have no money to give out anyway. So this seems to be more of an academic exercise than anything that's going to have any real, impact going forward. Randy did share with me that in his committee, there is a lot of talk around the federal appropriation of $105 billion of surface transportation programs. As you know, the transportation money on a federal level works through the state before it gets down to the regional and then city-county level. So they will be working on that later on this year. And then there's just an overall challenge of maintaining roads and streets. And an interesting statistic he handed on to me is that 81% of the roads in the state of California are actually managed and owned and operated by cities and counties. So obviously we have a lion's share of responsibility in those areas. The policy committees meet 4 times a year. The first meeting is just kind of more of an introductory because the legislature is really not in gear at this point, or wasn't a couple weeks ago. And then we meet again in April and in June, and then usually at the conference in September. So I don't know if Cliff and Stuart want to talk about their committees or not.
Yeah. It was quite fascinating being at the meeting, because there was about 30 people at least, or in this this giant in this room that had all these tables all connected together, so it was like this big rectangle thing of all these people, and and there are these different groups. There's that they've been around on this committee for years, and they sit in a certain corner, and others sit in another corner, and they just.
It's like first grade.
In some ways it was kind of like that, but it was very, I learned a lot. I did make a rookie, mistake. I should have just listened and not, put my little name thing on its side. We were dealing with this one particular bill, and what you do at these committees is that you give your recommendation to support a bill, or to support but amend a bill, or no, this is a bad idea, don't do it. And so the bill that was before us was one to provide extensions for tentative maps. I think that, yeah. So when we had the Opus project before us, that was something that the representative was talking about. Well, hey, I don't need to have that extension on my permit because the state's going to grant it to me. And so so there was the discussion of supporting this, and they were all supportive of it. And the bill was to allow an extension. But they said, okay, we'll allow the extension, but we want cities to have the opportunity to deny the extension for any reason. And to me, I was like, boy, that seems to contradict, the bill. And so I said, hey, what about that? And so they definitely schooled me on it and said, no, the league is here to make sure that cities' rights are fully represented, and the state does not, try and grab more power over us, especially in regards to land use, which is is a big thing that we need to protect. So after the meeting, the chair came up to me and he says, "Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Cliff, and this is what it's about. Is after it comes out of this committee, it's going to go to a different level, right? And they're gonna hammer it out. What they want to do is have the legislator make some corrections to his bill, so that we have that opportunity. Say you have a map that is just really outdated and it does not reflect your current general plan. That project can't move forward." And so, that's what it was about, and so it was a good learning experience for me. We also talked about what's going to happen after RDA, and there are some bills that are out there that are looking at coming up with some new options, and and Stuart might, he can talk about the details of that if he prefers to. But one of the things that I thought was interesting was that you can, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stuart, but you can charge a special sales tax within an RDA area, right? Is it? Yeah, so of course we don't have an RDA area anymore, but if we did and we built it out, the Baylands could charge a 1/4 cent sales tax, and how they would, how that would be voted.
Cheaper than ours?
Cheaper than ours.
Right. So what it would be is there was a bill proposed. Everybody's trying to figure out what's the next way to create economic development and create a tax increment.
Yeah.
Because tax increment is very useful in trying to build infrastructure. So one of the new tax increments they're looking at is potentially a sales tax. So you would have within an old RDA area, there's a bill that would propose that if you're within an old RDA area, then you could vote for a special sales tax within an add-on sales tax within that RDA area. So you would add on 1/4% or 0.5%, whatever that percent that they would allow to happen. And then the benefit of the tax increment is you then have a secure funding source that you can bond against, that you can then, build infrastructure from. The interesting thing, as Cliff said, for us is it seems as if, depending on the way the bill is written, is that it would be a vote of the people within the RDA.
There are no people.
Yeah,
There you go. Now, there's the interesting aspect of the bill. So how the bill is written. How the bill is written would be interesting to see. If is it a citywide election? Is it within the RDA? What does it mean to say that you could have a vote for a special tax within a special area of your city? And what it does is it allows, if you have a very concentrated sales tax area, you could add a sales tax there. And if you have another area that you're trying, that has more of the mom and pop shops, you may not have the sales tax there. But it would give you a long-range funding source that you could then build infrastructure with. And this is the big thing, is that people are trying to figure out, without RDA, how do you build the infrastructure to have economic development happen? Yeah. And so there's a lot of people searching in the dark for an answer, and they're still, my guess is they'll still be searching for a while.
Yes. All right. There's my report, and I'm sticking to it.
And they ganged up on you.
No, they didn't.
when you had it?
No, they did. They were very nice.
Okay, next.
And then the final item on the manager's reports was the, well, wait a minute, not the final one. We got
We're not quite
two more.
ready.
Three.
I'm going to have the city clerk give you a quick rundown of our Bayland Citizens Committee meeting.
So the first Bayland Citizens Committee meeting was held on January 28th, in which the mayor and city manager and community development director gave the committee background information. And then the committee sat around and discussed how they might organize and how they might take on reviewing the EIR. And then what they ultimately came up with, at least at this meeting, was to form a leadership subcommittee that would work together to bring a recommendation back to the whole group on how they might structure and talk about things in the future. And then another IT subcommittee that would talk about tools that are available to help everybody comment on different aspects of it and follow each other's comments. So, and then we had one person volunteer to be the information distributor. So it was a successful meeting, and the next one that they set was for February 12th. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Looks like
Okay, Greg, did you want to add since you were, no, I was asking Greg, but, yeah, okay, go ahead.
The question is how many people are in the committee?
Okay, good.
20 people showed up that night, but there are more like 26.
Good.
So.
Right. Right. Greg, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was somehow insufficient. Hi, Greg Anderson again. I was somehow insufficiently reluctant, and I ended up on both the organizational and the IT committee. And I'm trying to keep up with all of that. On the IT committee, we are looking at different tools that we might be able to use so that people can add annotations right inside the document in a way that will allow them to share them with each other. And I thought it would be really easy to find all sorts of tools that do that, and we do have some candidates, but we haven't come to a decision on what we think is best yet. And on the side of the organizational committee, we are putting together a survey to try and find the areas of interest for different people, so we can try to break up into subcommittees and not have any subcommittee missing any components, or too many people on one part, or have one subcommittee that has no one who likes to take notes and things like that. So that's where we are right now. It seems like we have time before the EIR comes out, although that time seems to be zooming by faster than we can imagine. So.
You have time, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's
Okay,
great.
Thanks very much. Yeah.
Thanks, Greg.
I think the latest guesstimate is end of March.
That's the latest.
Yeah, okay.
Jeez.
News
Not February, March anymore.
Okay, so
The final item is just a reminder, an announcement to everyone that we will be celebrating the service of former mayor and councilwoman Seppi Richardson, May 19th meeting, and that will start at 7 o'clock, and we will have refreshments here.
okay, we'll probably be, after people to prepare remarks or to be ready to say something so that we can have a broad spectrum of participation.
Have that Kager. All right.
Okay, subcommittee reports.
I had some.
Okay,
I
Clark.
had actually three different ones. Well, I informed you earlier about Clay and I going down to the county, and they were having a meeting in regards to the Proposition A funds, which are expecting to bring in $60 million per year. And we weren't specifically there for that, but, it's kind of a good time to just connect with our board of supervisors. And just have them keep on the radar some of the things we're looking at as far as affordable housing. And, since they are now the controller of the Affordable Housing Fund, since RDA disappeared, and so they seem to be receptive to that, and let them know some of the things that we have on the table right now. Also, I had an emergency services meeting, ALS, and we finally passed redoing our insurance, which reduces, about $30,000 a year? Yeah, which is actually a savings to all the cities. But we had a hard time getting a quorum there to pass that, so it's been on about 6 to 8 months worth of meetings, a couple meetings.
Oh, man.
So we had to get people to commit to come, and of course Hal's colleague Valerie, who everybody's met now, is the counsel for that, and that has to do with the ambulance services within the county. And also down in Redwood City, I had a OES meeting, which myself and Randy Bro are a part of, and I found that very interesting because there's one guy who did a presentation there. He's part of the medical corps. He's a retired doctor, and out on the coast, they have what's called the medical corps of retired physicians, and also physicians and medical professionals that aren't retired, where they're part of this corps, and they can travel, pretty much anywhere in the world to catastrophes, but they're training here in the Bay Area and developing these corps and communities, but they needed some kind of funding, to do it, and they're not talking a whole lot of money, like $36,000 a year. And actually, I'd like to have them come and do a presentation and just, maybe our local medical professionals maybe want to participate in it for Brisbane, to have a medical corps in Brisbane, where, we kind of always talked about it that, we have our community emergency volunteers, they're called CERTs now, where, we have medical professionals that are within local, if we have something happen, that they're able to have a mobilization point here in town. If they can't make it somewhere else to their designated job or whatever, that, we could set up a mobile hospital or whatever. And it seems to be very, very effective and a good way to use resources, especially in, an emergency time, that it's going to happen somewhere along the line. And also have the staff come down and just do a presentation of some of the stuff that they have going. And one of the things, too, is that you have these towers that are located around, and Chief, you're aware of that with the communications tower. We have ours here in Brisbane that we're done on grants, and they have one that's located at Skylon, and Skylon wants them to move, and then they're going to move it to an area that's populated now, and so there's, they want some direction from us, and I asked them to have council look into power of eminent domain to be able to keep it there where it's at. It's like cemetery. Disguise it, versus put it somewhere where it's going to be more highly controversial. But they have about $1 million in this funding right now that all the cities had paid into, and we discussed it and decided to probably best keep the money there, for when you go to upgrade in the future in 10 years with changing technology. This is for your radio transmitters. You want to be able to connect everywhere, so that way you don't have to go and reinvent the wheel. And then last one I have is on Council of Cities, of course, was with the MTC appointment. Now, a week and a half or 2 weeks before, I'd talked to Jerry Deal, and I let Jerry know that we're changing directions, that we'd be supporting Gina Pappin, so I wanted Jerry to know that, before he went into that. And so he took from our discussion, he told me that night that he's going to step out, which was, I thought, a gracious move on his part, and he really appreciated that I reached out to him to let him know that, we're not going to throw the support in his direction. He goes, I wish more people did that, so it's good for us, from a communicative standpoint. Of course, the first vote went down 10 to 10. And that's between Gina Pappen and Alicia Aguirre, and then they had a second vote, and then I think you all got the results, and then Alicia was appointed, so that was it.
It looked like 2 cities shifted. It's 12 to 10.
Yeah.
Or 12 to 8. 12
Yeah,
to 8.
yeah, 12.
Yeah, South City was one of those.
Yeah, South City and San Mateo.
Yeah.
San Bruno.
I also talked to Supervisor Horsley about seeing what he could do about getting some Measure A funds for the medical corps, because he's very much aware of them, so he likes the program also. So, you know, coming from a public safety background. So in the future, I'd like to set maybe with you, and we're just probably talking about April, is maybe have these folks come in and do a presentation, 15 minutes or 20 minutes to the council, and I think it's very good, you know, and I was thinking maybe, you know, Earthquake Awareness Month, which is also, I think, in April or March or somewhere around there. October. Is it October? Yeah. Well, before then. I'm thinking the 1906 earthquake was April 18th, 1906, so, yeah, or maybe that was the Titanic. No, it was April 12th. Anyway, a few disasters have happened. Yeah. But I think those are all good things, at least
Okay, no,
for public awareness. Okay.
So let's do that. Anything from CCAG?
We didn't have a meeting.
No meeting?
Yeah. Oh, we had a meeting with, what was it, Peninsula Traffic Congestion Relief Alliance also. So, and that was just more of a business as usual meeting. We talked about the shuttles. I was on the committee for looking at the joint contract with Samtrans, you know, and made a few suggestions and changes on that, but that's a way of economizing on going out for shuttles for hire. And since, you know, sometimes our shuttle here in Brisbane is a Peninsula shuttle, then they flip the placard and it turns into a Samtrans shuttle, right? And that people call and they're used during the non-peak hours. Then they flip the placard back at the end of the day, and then it becomes the free shuttle, but it's free all the time. But this is about going out to contract for shuttle services and that was also interesting too, because we had 2 guys there. One was Dan McCoy, who runs the shuttle service out at Genentech, and Dan used to work for MITSMA, which was the predecessor of the Alliance. And I was the first chairman of the board on the Peninsula Congestion Relief Alliance, and that's when we combined Multi-City Transportation Agency of MITSMA, and then ITSMA, which was the South County one. And so now Dan's doing that, and so he had, it'd be really useful to actually have Dan come in and do a presentation too, because I mean, if we're looking at some of the businesses that we're going to be doing in the future on how to set these things up and what the benefits are to the employers, you know, and how it can really take a lot of stress off of the employees, you know, and being able to have shuttles, designated shuttles like what Genentech has, or Google, you know, where they have actual buses that, you know, go to these communities and pick people up, and, you know, they're just like, you know, point A to point B, and don't have to worry about transportation anywhere, at least during their work. And another guy was, I think he, a younger fellow, got his PhD down at Stanford, has developed a company with some of his colleagues, kind of like how Google spawned out, and are making these electric skateboards, electric-powered skateboards, and they have a radius of about 6 miles. They can go about 6 miles, and this it's really interesting. Of course, you know, I was looking at that, I was thinking, yeah, he's saving energy, but medical bills are going way up, you know, for people like me. You got to put handlebars on it for me. That was the way, you know. he showed us a map, and it'd be kind of interesting, because, you know, where he really wants to take the company is for people that have mobility challenges, you know, for wheelchairs or things like that, is to expand this out. And they're developing this technology using, I think, lithium-ion batteries, which is a very little battery pack that's, you know, high-powered, and these things can get up to, like, you know, 15, 18 miles per hour. They can go up 15% incline. And you showed a map on, just on the Caltrain services, where you can carry these skateboards. And of course, this is probably catered to, you know, more of the younger generation. It's a little more mobile, but, you know, some people are, you know, good at it, but, you know I wouldn't be, you know. But on the Caltrain corridor, of how it's expanded the radius out, because we've talked about this, that if you have people within a quarter-mile walking distance to half-mile walking distance, and then after that you start losing them, that where you start transferring out your radius of how you can start using your public transportation, such as the choo-choo that runs north and south of Caltrain. And is really developing popularity, because, I mean, that's one of the things about the shuttle service, jumping back, is the biggest challenge in this county is the east-west corridors. We know we got north-south covered, but how do you get there? And, you know, now everybody's going, let's make a transit village. Let's build next to the trains on polluted property. Anyway, that's it.
Okay.
So it'd be good to have him come here also and do a presentation. I think it's worthwhile.
Thanks. Any others?
I attended a library JPA meeting this morning. It was, no decisions were made. They gave a mid-year financial report, which was pretty much as expected. And next meeting is in April.
I had a arena meeting last week, and it was just to finalize all the numbers. But instead of finalizing the numbers, Menlo Park, they're working on this affordable housing project. They're trying to partner with some other entity, and I'm not sure if it's a city or it's the county, to perhaps give them some money as part of this project to build it. And then that entity would receive credit for the arena numbers. And so they're not sure if this is going to be able to fly, but they wanted to have some time. And so now we're going to meet in a couple of weeks. I think I just got, this might be an old one. Yeah, this is an old one. But we're going to meet in a couple of weeks. And then if they got it, their act together, we can make it happen, then